Hi, I'm Dan Hickey. Thanks for viewing my presentation from the Fall Forum with the Federal Information Security Educators on September 17, 2024. Uh, I'm a professor and a program coordinator with the Learning Sciences program at Indiana University, where I work at the Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research and the Center for Research on Learning and Technology. My work on digital badges that I'll be speaking about today was funded by the MacArthur Foundation's Digital Media and Learning Initiative. Additional work on cybersecurity was funded by the National Science Foundation, California's K-12 high-speed network, and several federal agencies. I'm going to do a very quick overview of badges for those of you who are new to them. They really originated in 2010 and 2011. That's Connie Yowell from MacArthur. She kicked off the Digital Media and Learning Competition for Badges for Lifelong Learning, and there you see Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan as part of the kickoff. It garnered much attention and really helped kick off this whole thing that we now call open digital badges. Badges are very different than other forms of credentials because they contain information. Specifically, they can contain claims and evidence, and they can contain links to more information. They're just an image, a JSON LD image that contains links. And those links can be to other information, evidence, all kinds of things that increase the value of the badge. Because they're an image, they can then circulate just like in any other image in the network, although because they use the metadata behind the badge to make this information easily readable by humans and machines, they can circulate in valued networks. And this is a lot of possibilities. The ultimate value is that it makes it possible to create what we call a badge-based learning ecosystem. There was a lot of excitement about 10 years ago around this whole ecosystem notion. And here you see an image of all the various parts of that ecosystem that everyone appreciated need to be in place for this to work. The challenge, of course, is that all of those pieces eventually need to be in place, or at least most of them not only need to be in place, and they need to be working together for this ecosystem to emerge. And as I'll show you in the latter part of my talk, this has largely happened by now. Back in 2017, the Chronicle of Higher Education asked me to make some predictions about how badges and this broader ecosystem idea and e-credentials might eventually transform higher education. I drew parallels with e-commerce back around 1999 or so. There are a lot of retailers who dismissed e-commerce and they did it to their peril. So basically, I argue if you were in the higher education space in 2017 dismissing open credentials and badges, you were acting a lot like the publishers who dismissed e-commerce. Well, what it took was uh, consumer reviews, right? What happened around 2010 is that consumer reviews had amassed enough credibility that everyday customers, not just business to business, but everyday people like you and me, felt comfortable making purchases online. And there's a similar parallel with a kind of trust network that needs to emerge and needed to emerge around open badges for them to take off like e-commerce did. And I think we're pretty much on the verge of that happening at this point. I assume that most of you are familiar with this report from last year's Fall Forum. I thought this was a tremendous piece of work and had these really clear pillars about what needs to happen to really move the cyber workforce education forward. The report lays out a number of lines of effort that the National Cyber Workforce Coordinating Group is undertaking in support of the ambitious goals of this report. And my analysis suggested to me anyways, that many of these lines of efforts could really benefit from the systematic use of badges or other forms of micro-credentials. So right off the bat, one of the first lines of efforts is fostering an ecosystem to enhance foundational cyber skill and learning opportunities. And again, the whole point of badges is creating such an ecosystem. And here you can see the three others where I've highlighted ways that it occurs to me that badges could support this effort. The same is true for Pillar 2, transform cyber education. I've highlighted integrating cybersecurity across disciplines to prepare the cyber workforce. Well, one of the important things about badges is they function as uh, what we call boundary objects. This is something that can move across contexts and disciplines, across disciplinary boundaries, and still maintain their meaning. Also, under Pillar 2, the report is very enthusiastic about newer so-called competency-based learning models. And of course, as I'll elaborate later, badges are very prominent in competency-based education and absolutely central to these new ideas about digital learning and employment records. Finally, under Pillar 3, expand and enhance America's cyber workforce, I've highlighted two of the four that I think badges can really support. Expand skills-based hiring and skills-based workforce development practices. Well, badges really epitomize skills-based hiring development because unlike a conventional credential, each badge or badge pathway, they really are about specific skills and they present evidence about that supports whether or not the earner has those specific skills. Now I'd like to shift gears and talk about the lessons we learned when we were studying the Badges for Lifelong Learning initiative in what we call the Design Principles Documentation Project and try to apply them to these challenges or these work lines I've just discussed. In this project, we studied the winners, the awardees in this competition. They got 600 proposals. They ended up funding 29 to develop badges and content and 3 badge-related platforms. This was a very, very diverse set of badges, badge issuers ranging from organizations supporting veterans to peer-to-peer university, just really a bunch of very ambitious efforts that really lent themselves well to badges. MacArthur knew going in that some of these weren't going to work, right? That's the whole point of something this ambitious and this brand new. Ultimately, we concluded that around half of these 30 projects were actually able to build the badge system that they had proposed, whereas only 11 we concluded really succeeded in creating a larger badge-based ecosystem. And so, hence the talk of the title of the talk, that, badges, they really did work better in some places than others. And we think that there's a lot of lessons for efforts in cybersecurity going forward. And I'm going to share a few of those with you now. This gets a little complicated, and I'll be linking you to a report where you can access all of this information. But one of our primary findings was that badges work better where content and technology already exist. On the left, you can see that the project that only had to layer in badges to an existing technology and content system were much more successful than the projects on the right that had to build both technology and content to build their badge system. We found that badges work better when they're used as informal credentials. Um, the 5 projects that tried to get sort of formal credential associated with their badges, only one of them succeeded. And that kind of makes sense if you think about it, that there's just a lot of other things that have to happen to associate formal school or university credit. And badges really aren't set up to do that. That's in some senses replicating an existing credentialing system. We also concluded that at that time, badges work better when they're internally valued. We found that the projects that tried to gain external endorsement for their badges really struggled. Now, part of that was the time, right? This was 10 years ago when people didn't appreciate what badges were. But I also raised this point because I want to let everyone know, remind everyone that the Open Badges Infrastructure 2.0 and now the 3.0 that I'll talk about has a very sophisticated mechanism built into it to support endorsement features, and this is really quite important. We found that badges work better when they offer unique information Some of these badge systems, they really were really redundant. 4-H, for example, they already had an existing uh, credentialing and networking system. The badges were sort of just additions to that, and ultimately they were really redundant. And so um, it just didn't really add much value compared to the work that it took to build the ecosystem. Batches work better where learning is social and networked, and this may counter this push for competency-based education in the report because CBE is often very individualized and isolated, and that really works against students working together in sort of social networks. We found that supported to reporter medals and mouse wins both had very successful badge-based ecosystem because the learning was social and networked. They awarded participation badges. I don't mean attendance badges, but real participation badges for participating in social activities. And the assessment itself was very social. And they also layered their badges into existing content and tech. And these were two really celebrated badge ecosystems that emerged out of this project. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the flip side of that same finding. Most of the competency-based systems that we studied, they failed. They didn't get off the ground. Um, and this gets at something very important. We see this a lot in competency-based education, which makes really remarkably big demands on assessment. They have huge expectations for the amount of assessment that the ecosystem can handle. Um, and we found that those expectations were really just unachievable or unsustainable. Please allow me to shift gears again. Now, I'd like to talk about some resources that I can offer you, that we can offer you, that came out of this work. This is my lab's blog, Remediating Assessment, and you can access a number of reports, including the one that I've just been talking about. There's the shortened URL. That's Remediating Assessment RMA Badges at Bitly. These are the resources that came out of the design principles documentation project, giving some really detailed, hands-on sort of insights about what we experienced and where we found that badges work better. These resources are all about endorsement. This is this newer feature that allows you to not only, as an organization, for example, add your endorsement to a badge before it's actually issued. But once a badge is issued, a member of that organization can go in and add a personalized endorsement after looking at the evidence in the badge in light of the claims in the badge. This chapter is more academic. It's about motivation, and it's about the way that we really need to think about motivation really differently. This traditional obsession or concern with extrinsic motivation uh, is really problematic when you think deeply about what it means to motivate learning with digital badges. Likewise, this is also an academic article, and it really has to do with the fact that badges really need you to move away from traditional notions of validity and think more about the notion of credibility when you're thinking about the value of badges. This handbook chapter, elaborated on three very distinctive functions of badges or categories of functions. It's really moving from measuring achievement to capturing learning, from credentialing graduates to recognizing learning, and from accrediting schools to endorsing learning. And badges can really transform all of those important functions in really revolutionary ways that have themselves transformative potential. Now, if you're going forward with digital badges, there's three really, really big developments that have happened already that you should be aware of. One is that the OBI infrastructure, the Open Badges infrastructure, was handed off from Mozilla to the One EdTech Learning Consortium. So One EdTech is now responsible for the metadata standards that make badges interoperable. In 2022, Credly, the private company that emerged out of the Open Badges competition I mentioned, were purchased by Pearson. Credly is a big player in this space. They're very corporate. They have a very interesting, easy to gain model. that many people like. Uh, then finally in 2022 also, Concentric Sky, the company where Nate Otto created the Badger platform that was popular with Canvas users, was actually purchased by Instructure. And so Badger is now a function within the popular Canvas LMS called Canvas Credentials. My research is focused on cybersecurity rather than badges since 2020. And so I reached out to some of the leaders, some of my good friends who I got to know in my decade working with badges, and asked them, like, what are the most important recent developments that you think this audience should be familiar with? First and foremost is the DCC, the Digital Credentials Consortium. They're creating new open source tools. They're really coordinating a lot of stuff. The awesome Carrie Lemois is now at Carnegie Mellon heading that effort. Um, Nate Otto uh, emphasized this cross-compliant metadata standards is a really important thing. This includes now the OBI is at 3.0. There's a lot of new features in 3.0 that are just beginning to be taken advantage of. The WC3's verifiable credentials are consistent with these standards. And then One Ed Tech Consortium is advancing a very ambitious program of research around comprehensive learner records. And Meanwhile, these credentials are now cryptographically signed. Um, and Noah Geisel talked about the learning employment records and if you want to find out more, the LER ecosystem map, and you'll also find the Learn and Work ecosystem library. Those are outstanding resources for folks getting started. In terms of major trends, uh, Noah mentioned that well over 100 million open badges have been issued. It's apparently getting closer to 200 million. A new badge appears on LinkedIn profiles every 60 seconds. And consistent with the federal report, skills-based hiring is huge. The skills forward grants are making a lot of progress. And this whole trend towards alignment, right? This is really complicated to get these very different systems to be interoperable to create this sort of network, this trust network I mentioned earlier. And that's really happening. And this idea that evidence really adds trust by demonstrating how the criteria have been met. And then finally, an important trend is that there's a whole new crop of vendors and open source software out there for you to take advantage of. I was pleased to see in my recent search how many cybersecurity education initiatives have taken up badges. These include my Indiana rivals at Purdue and my Indiana colleagues at the Kelley School of Business. So there's quite a few out there now, and I'm sure more to come. If you're interested, there's a couple of summits next year. There will be one digital badge summit at Florida Gulf Coast, January 2029. There will also be one that Noah Geisel will be running at UC Boulder, July 21 through 23. If you're interested in the international work, the Open EPIC conference will be in Paris, November 6th through 8th, 2025. And then let me add a quick shout out to the wonderful folks at Digital Promise. They're doing really interesting work in this really brand new report on micro-credentials and learner employment record technologies for youth. It's just a tremendous piece of work. So if you're interested in K-12 settings and micro-credentials, I highly recommend this report. In terms of scholarly research, I track it pretty closely, and there really is a remarkably little scholarly research at this intersection of open badges and cybersecurity education. Uh, Pike and colleagues at Portland, I believe, have a very interesting digital badge system associated with their program that they've written about, and there's just a few others. We'd certainly like to see more, given how massive the research base is on both cybersecurity education and digital badges. It was interesting for me to find that there really wasn't that much to report in this regard. A quick shout out for some of my own work. My colleague Ron Carrington and I have written this triad of papers that talks about a topic that's very central to my research, and that is learning transfer. One of these papers has been published that focuses on traditional cognitive theories of transfer in the Journal of Cybersecurity Education, Research and Practice. We've got another one on situative theories of transfer that's in revision, as well as another one on culturally sustaining cybersecurity education. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. There again is the URL to the remediating assessment page with the resources I mentioned. You can email me at dthickey@iu.edu. I'd love to hear from you if you have questions, and in particular, if you have insights about promising emerging badge systems in cybersecurity or research in this area. I'd love to hear about it. So thank you very much.